Ashley Kim with Together for Choice. We're continuing the series called My Life, My Choice, and in this episode, we're going to talk about the Home and Community-Based Services Settings Rule, which is a federal Medicaid regulation that affects every individual receiving Medicaid funding for their home and community-based services. I've done many presentations on the settings rule over the years, but this will be my first time recording it. So I'm very excited that you'll be able to have access to this information 24/7. We have so much to cover, so let's begin. The Settings Rule is a federal Medicaid regulation that establishes requirements for residential and non-residential settings in which individuals receive Medicaid, home, and community-based services as an alternative to receiving services in a hospital, nursing facility, or intermediary care facility for individuals with intellectual and developmental disabilities. The home and community-based services have been available since the early 1980s when Congress authorized states to operate waiver programs through Section 1915C of the Social Security Act. These state waiver programs are partially funded by federal Medicaid, which is administered by the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services, also known as CMS. Prior to 2014, CMS's traditional interpretation of Section 1915C was that states are allowed to provide HCBS funding in a setting that is not a hospital, nursing facility, or ICF. This interpretation allowed a broad range of settings from which individuals with disabilities could choose. Also, Medicaid programs were not permitted to dictate the settings in which an individual lived or received services. Therefore, individual choice in setting was required. Then in 2014, CMS introduced a new regulation called the Home and Community-Based Services Settings Rule. The Settings Rule established requirements for HCBS settings. It defines settings that are and are not HCBS and settings presumed not HCBS. The rule also set additional requirements for provider-owned or controlled HCBS residential settings. The purpose of the rule was to enhance the quality of home and community-based services and to ensure that individuals receiving Medicaid have full access to the greater community and have additional protections. Now, let me explain why Medicaid HCBS is important. According to Kaiser Family Foundation, Medicaid pays for 52% of this country's long-term support services spending. And 44%, or approximately 769,000 out of 1.7 million enrollees of 1915C waivers, are people with intellectual or developmental disabilities. More importantly, the IDD population spending makes up about 70% or $34 billion of the total $48.6 billion of Section 1915C waiver expenditures. So understanding Medicaid HCBS is very important. Now let's go back to the settings rule. The settings rule requires that the setting in which individual receiving HCBS meets the following. The setting is integrated in and supports full access of individuals receiving Medicaid HCBS to the greater community to the same degree of access as individuals not receiving Medicaid HCBS. And the setting is selected by the individual from among setting options, including non-disability specific settings, and an option for a private unit in a residential setting. It also ensures an individual's right of privacy, dignity, and respect, as well as freedom from coercion and restraint. It also optimizes, but does not regiment, individual initiative, autonomy, and independence in making life choices, including, but not limited to, daily activities, physical environment, and with whom to interact. It facilitates individuals' choice regarding services and supports and who provides them. Additionally, in provider-owned or controlled residential settings, the unit or dwelling is a specific physical place that can be owned, rented, or occupied under a legally enforceable agreement by the individual receiving services. Each individual has privacy in their sleeping or living unit, including doors lockable by the individual, choice of a roommate if sharing a unit, and the freedom to furnish and decorate their sleeping or living units. Individuals have the freedom and support to control their own schedules and activities and have access to food at any time. Individuals are able to have visitors of their choosing at any time, and that the setting is physically accessible to the individual. Now, this does not mean that someone is going to have access to a 24-hour buffet and that there could be no house rules or boundaries. No, we have to find the right balance. This does not mean that people can do whatever they want. It's all about using common sense. CMS is fully aware that for some individuals, these requirements need to be modified due to their unique circumstances. Now, modifications are allowed as long as they are supported by a specific assessed need and justified in the person-centered service plan. The intent of the settings rule was to establish a more outcome-oriented definition of home and community-based settings that focuses on nature and quality of individuals' experiences, rather than focusing solely on a setting's location, geography, or physical characteristics. So what settings are not HCBS? From the beginning, CMS made it clear that the following were not HCBS: a hospital, nursing facility, intermediary care facility for IDD, and institution for mental disease. Next, the following are presumed to be not HCBS: settings in a publicly or privately owned facility providing inpatient treatment. Settings on grounds of or adjacent to a public institution. Settings with the effect of isolating individuals from the broader community of individuals not receiving Medicaid HCBS. So we're now going to focus on the third bullet point here. Question: what settings have the effect of isolating individuals from the broader community? To answer this question, CMS issued a guidance in 2014 that described settings that have the effect of isolating individuals receiving HCBS from the broader community. Here's the thing, this 2014 guidance has been completely replaced by a new guidance in March 2019. However, since many states are still following and trying to implement the old guidance, it's important for you to know and understand the history of this guidance, which continues to be controversial. Here's the summary of the settings that isolate. The setting is designed and built specifically and exclusively for people with disabilities. The setting provides multiple types of services and activities on site, including housing, day services, medical, behavioral, and therapeutic services, and/or social recreation activities, which means that multiple settings that are located together and are operated by the same provider. Examples include farmstead or disability-specific farm community, gated or secure community, and other disability-specific communities. Now, CMS wasn't saying that these type of disability-specific or congregant settings were completely prohibited. They wanted to have a further look on these communities through a process called heightened scrutiny. Here's how it works. First, states have to identify settings that are presumed to not comply with the settings rule based on CMS's guidance. States then have to develop an evaluative tool to assess each setting and determine each setting's final status. If a state believes that a setting that is presumed to be not HCBS is in fact HCBS, which means that the setting maximizes choice, rights, and opportunities for full access to the greater community, then the state can submit evidence, including public input, demonstrating that the setting does have the qualities of a home and community-based setting and not the qualities of an institution. And then CMS has to review the evidence and agree that the setting meets the HCBS setting requirements for home and community-based settings and does not have the qualities of an institution. As I explained earlier, the purpose of the settings rule was to enhance the quality of HCBS and ensure that individuals receiving Medicaid have full access to the greater community. It was not meant to restrict or eliminate options. But unfortunately, many states and advocates misinterpreted the settings rule and jumped to the conclusion that CMS was prohibiting any congregant or disability-specific settings such as large campus, farmstead, or other disability-specific settings. This was not supposed to be about physical characteristics, geography, or locations. But unfortunately, farm communities, rural communities, gated communities, and other disability-specific communities were unfairly accused of being isolating and segregating. These blanket accusations were unfounded and unwarranted because people choose to live in these communities because they want community. For many states, the heightened scrutiny process placed a tremendous administrative burden on them that they were more inclined to prohibit disability-specific settings altogether, thereby restricting and eliminating options. The state's misinterpretation of the settings rule has created so much barrier to creating new housing and programs for people with intellectual and developmental disabilities, which is absolutely unacceptable when we're facing a tsunami wave of individuals with autism and other developmental disabilities entering adulthood and falling off the cliff. In his letter to CMS on November 3, 2017, Scott Mendel, chairman of Together for Choice, highlighted that individuals with IDD should have the same right as non-disabled individuals to choose the communities they wish to access, and that communities are often not geographically based, rather they are based on common interests. Also, the rule's heightened scrutiny provision for campus settings, farmsteads, and other intentional communities is actually a discrimination. And the rule is highly prescriptive and imposes a significant burden on individuals, their families, and their providers and the states. Together for Choice then asked many members of Congress to write a letter urging CMS to amend its regulation to return choice to individuals and their families. We also proposed regulatory amendments and proposed a legislation that would restore the individual's right to choose the setting which best meets his or her needs. It's important to note that the proposed regulatory amendments and the proposed legislation would not change the prohibition on individuals receiving home and community-based services in an institution. In addition, they would not limit CMS's ability or a state's ability to regulate and monitor the quality of services provided or to crack down on neglect or abuse of individuals with disabilities. Thankfully, CMS heard from many concerned individuals, families, and organizations, and on March 22, 2019, CMS issued a new guidance that superseded and replaced in totality prior guidance on the criteria of an isolating setting. The new guidance no longer automatically presumes campus settings, farmsteads, and other disability-specific settings to be isolating. Instead, CMS says that it will look into the following factors. First, due to the design or model of service provision in the setting, individuals have limited, if any, opportunities for interaction in and with the broader community, including with individuals not receiving Medicaid-funded HCBS. Also, the setting restricts beneficiary choice to receive services or to engage in activities outside of the setting. Or the setting is physically located, separate and apart from the broader community, and does not facilitate beneficiary opportunity to access the broader community and participate in community services consistent with the beneficiary's person-centered service plan. We asked CMS to clarify first and third bullet answers. Due to the design or model of service provision in the setting, individuals have limited, if any, opportunities for interaction in and with the broader community, including with individuals not receiving Medicaid-funded HCBS. CMS clarified that this first statement was intended to address provider policies, procedures, and practices. For example, how do you organize community engagement activities? How do you organize individual schedules, transportation, and activities? CMS made it very clear that the rule does not prohibit on-site services in a setting. They just can't be the only option for people. We then asked CMS to clarify the third bullet answer. The setting is physically located, separate and apart from the broader community, and does not facilitate beneficiary opportunity to access the broader community and participate in community services consistent with the beneficiary's person-centered service plan. Our questions were, how would you measure separate and apart? By distance, how will you ascertain whether or not people are able to be a part of the broader community? Our concern was that the states would get stuck on the physical part and not focus on the outcomes. CMS said that isolation can be twofold, both physical and programmatic. For campus settings that are significantly isolated from a broader community, if people never have to leave and everything is provided for them, and people never need to go beyond the physical boundaries of their community for anything, this will raise a flag for further exploration. At the same time, there is no prohibition of on-site services, but people should have real choices and know them. Individuals need to have a choice to use what is on-site and elsewhere. There should not be the sentiment that all anyone needs is to be found on the site and that there's no reason to go anywhere. Do the residents ever have to leave? Can they obtain everything on the premises? Is the setting really insular and not involving anything beyond its walls? Here, it is not about the bricks and mortar. It's about the person-centered planning being adhered to and about person's choice. It has been over a year since CMS issued a new guidance on the criteria of an isolating setting. Unfortunately, some states are still following the old guidance by continuing to discriminate against disability-specific settings, including farmsteads, gated communities, and other intentional communities. This is why we need to continue to share our stories and advocate for choice. In future episodes, we will share the impact of the state's misinterpretation of the settings rule on the real lives of individuals with disabilities and their families and providers. We will also share our provider's perspective on the heightened scrutiny process, so please stay tuned and don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel. There's so much more to the settings rule, but we're going to have to stop here for now. If you have any questions about the rule, you can contact us or visit our website. Thank you for joining us. Please take care and see you next time.